Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So Mike and I are here for a little friendly phase, a little change it up from our usual setup with Matty and I. Are here today to talk a little bit about set composition, some of the different ways in which you guys can set up your equipment to optimize obviously performance, to make sure you've not got any crossover in the bag. That's something I've seen a lot of people's bags, Mikey, is that they complain about having two clubs to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So whether it be a driver that goes the same as a 3-wood, a 5-iron that goes the same as a 4-iron, that type of thing. We see that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, but how many times do we get guys who are super steep on it with the driver, and we've got to correct a little bit of their swing, and then you can create some proper gapping. And
it's important, part of our job, and we talk about the 75-25 rule, where we are, obviously club fitters, and that's what we do. That's our whole, that's our role here. But we have to be mindful that 25% has to be mindful of what's going on with the swing.
Yeah.
So we've got to understand the dynamics, the delivery consequences that are going on with the driver, with the irons. And like Mike said, if the driver's too steep, you're never going to be optimized.
No. There's no chance to benefit from the driver if you're crazy steep. And that's where guys come in and go, my 3-wood goes further than my driver. And the first question is, or my first thought is, steep. And get them on first couple swings, and it's like, all right, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of making some adjustments, and then we can start fitting them into some products.
It's funny, we just done our Q&A tonight, and one guy said that he hits his 3-wood for the driver. What my first thought was, steep, a little bit across it. Tees it down and hits the 3-wood great, hits the driver all over the face, and just struggles with it. So let's touch base on a little bit about sort of distance related set makeup. So when I say distance related, if you hit the ball 200 yards, the probability of you needing 14 clubs, you probably don't.
Minimal. Yeah.
So obviously, driver being the 200 yards sort of club, the next one needs to go about 180-ish.
175, 180.
Yep, somewhere about that. Then the next one about 160, and then so on and so forth. That's where I see people having too many clubs in the bag. They fill the top end of the bag with woods.
We see it a lot with ladies and with seniors. Yes. I mean, make the bag lighter, especially if you're going to push your cart or carry. Right. You've got way too many clubs. And we've done recently in the build shop 4 or 5 sets where it's like 7, 8, 9 pitch, or 7, 9 utility wedge.
Yeah. Because people can't space them out. It doesn't make sense.
No.
So it's good to know. For you guys who have got some speed out there, who are thinking, okay, how does this apply to me? The further you hit it, obviously the bigger the spaces are going to be between each club. So call it the 300-yard driver, the 275 3-wood, the 250 hybrid long iron or fair, or 5-wood, whatever that may be. That's the type of thing we're looking at. At that point, your irons should be about, if you hit it that far, about 12 yards apart. If you are hitting the ball no further than 200 yards total, or 210, 220 total, your irons might only be 9 or 10 yards apart. So knowing those gaps and having a gapping session, that's the service we offer, where you can actually come and learn how far your clubs go. I would say that's a great starting point for people to understand their set composition.
For sure.
Go through a gapping session.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about what that involves when you're doing a gapping session.
Getting the customers hitting, driver right down to pitching wedge, and then we can kind of piece together, okay, we'll look through your data and go, there is, a 25-yard gap between your hybrid and your next iron.
Exactly.
And that's a problem. And then that's when we can either fit in another hybrid, maybe adjust some loft and lies,
plug those gaps.
Exactly. And then once the tighter we can get those gaps, then obviously it's going to help them out a ton. Generally, it ends up being that we find there's a large gap sometimes between the 3-wood and the, a lot of guys, some go 3-wood to an iron.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, you've got, what's your 215-yard carry? What's your 220? And they just don't have one.
Exactly. I think when it comes down to the way the home course is set up for a player, I like to ask a lot of questions about, okay, what length are your par 3s? Are you able to go for the par 5s and 2? Maybe are you able to go for the longer par 4s and 2?
Yep.
If you don't quite hit it as far. That stuff matters because we want to make those shots as easy as possible. So we need to see, the player's own swing characteristics to know what they need. So, if you're that type of player who has quite a flat and rounded swing, maybe you love a 5-wood. If you're a little bit on the steeper side and the fairway doesn't perform so great for you, maybe you're more of a driving iron or hybrid type of guy. So your swing characteristics will play a big part in set composition as well, and another reason to be analysed and go through that gapping session so you can have a professional, like one of our guys here, go over that with you and explain to you why you need certain things. If we take it a step further and go into sort of wedge composition.
I was going to say, wedge is a big one.
What is big?
That gap wedge to sand wedge for people or gap wedge to pitching wedge, huge.
I was going to say that, and
Massive.
That's become a bigger issue, hasn't it, recently, with sort of the, I would say, progression of the way irons have been designed. They're designed with so much speed DNA now. Yeah. It's almost tough to get a Vokey or a Cleveland wedge to match up with a pitching wedge.
You're going P790 or Apex or X Forged to a Vokey, there's going to be a distance, loss there. So we've got to figure out, that's when we play with lofts and lie and understand maybe you need a set gap wedge.
Correct.
And then go 56, 60 just because, or whatever the makeup is, and that will help you kind of around the greens a little bit more.
And I know I see that a lot. I see a lot of the set gap wedges nowadays. One of the questions I'll ask is, do you hit a lot of full shots with the gap wedge, or do you chip with the gap wedge? If the answer is I don't really chip with it, I don't really hit specialty shots with it, I go, well, if you're just hitting full shots, then why not take these benefits of the forgiveness, the additional distance that you get, like the iron set, keep that continuity going throughout the set and kind of keep the blend going. Then we can start to customize the sand wedge and lob wedge for you and start to talk about grind and the design of that wedge. So whether you're 50, which has become the most popular gap wedge now, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's not that many 52s out there anymore.
No, 50 with a lot of bounce. And a lot of these wedge companies are also making now sand wedges and lob wedges with a ton of forgiveness as well. So if you do go from that, distance set, there are wedges out there that will provide that little bit extra distance. Even though it is a 56 or 60, it still goes a little bit further.
We see it, don't we? Pin Glide, we do, that's our best selling wedge in the store is the Pin Glide, and that design of having thinning out the face or the back of it, so it almost becomes a cavity back wedge. The Rotex 3 cavity back wedge, the CBX by
tons
Cleveland.
Of CBX.
Nice wide sole, tons of forgiveness, little undercut cavity built in there, designed to maintain as much ball speed as possible, but still have wedge specific features, milled face, custom grind on the bottom, all that
Give them the
stuff.
ability to still open it up a little bit for those tighter, tight lies around the green.
And you need that versatility, obviously, to be able to play a variety of shots. And this is part of the fitting process that we get into with our customers. We talk about all these different things that you need to think of. They're not just preferences of the player, but they're performance benefits as well.
Yeah.
In terms of, let's talk a little bit about sort of shaft weight progression.
For sure.
So let's take the player who hits it 230 yards. Most likely they're going to be in 50 gram
50
shaft
grams,
probably.
Yeah.
Okay, so 50 gram driver shaft. So, was with a customer last night. I fit me earlier in the year to a great speeder, Fujikura Speeder 474, about 50 gram shaft. Pull out his 3-wood, 83 gram shaft in there.
Yeah.
And I go,
no thanks.
It doesn't really kind of work. You've got, your fairway wood shaft is double the weight of your driver shaft. Let's book you in for a fairway wood fit. So making sure that is nice and progressive is very, very important to making sure that the equipment isn't hindering the swing.
Yeah, I always find with hybrids, for a lot of people, everything's heavy. I had a guy with 90 gram hybrid shafts, and I fit him into 60 eyes. So he's like, oh, I still love the feel of them, and I'm like, let's see the performance between something a little bit lighter, and then he's on his way. But I just find in stuff again off the rack and not understanding the progression of weight throughout a set, that's where we see a lot of mistakes.
When we talk about set composition, guys, one thing I really want to touch on is The best club fitters in the world, for my money, reverse engineer the process. When I say that, what they actually do is they before they even think about what the build is all about, they think about, is it a good build rather than just a good fit? Mm-hmm. You can have something that seems like a good fit, but actually the components don't combine to create a good build. And as our head club builder here at TXG, I mean, Mike knows exactly what I'm talking about. How many times have you seen a spec sheet come in and you just go, that just doesn't jive?
Yeah.
Those heads, those shafts, those grips at that intended length, bad build.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started with some new fitters on staff, we explained to them there are bad builds.
Yeah.
Over length, unless the guy or lady can handle that type of weight and that's kind of prescribed, there's times where I will send an email and go, this might not be able to happen.
Here's maybe a suggestion of another route.
Exactly.
That type of thing. I mean, I think we get a lot of the time, certain people will maybe get caught up a little bit in swing weight, and then the fitter's prescribed a 50-gram iron shaft and they're played at half inch under length, and the guy goes, sure, that sounds great, but I want it at D3.
Yeah.
And you go, no chance.
No chance. No matter the amount of graphite tip weights and lead tip weights, no matter how much we try to get that, there's no chance.
Yeah. So set composition, guys. It includes all of these things, all of these variables that go into our thought process, and we're putting together the sort of the best set for you to absolutely optimize your performance. Again, set composition will include the trajectory of your golf ball. That's a big part of it for me. So if I get the player who, predominantly hits the ball exceptionally low, and they're in, a driving iron or a hybrid, and they just can't get the ball up, the first thing I'm going to do is to get them into a fairway wood.
Yeah.
So I look at the design features of that club. So the thinner profile head, it's wider from front to back, so the CG's further back, which will launch the ball a little bit higher. All those sorts of things. We really focus on the intended apex of the player, don't we?
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
Always.
I had a fit today with a guy, and he said, what launch and spin are you looking for me at? I said, I don't really have an intended launch and spin. I want the club flying at 70 to 80 feet in that window.
Yep.
If you're in that 70 to 80 feet, those launch and spin rates will be where they need to be. That's what we need them to be. Always tend to tell our customers who are coming in, and we're talking about max apex, the old Ben Hogan story about when he and his caddy used to do his loft and lies. What they actually used to do at his golf club in Shady Oaks was they used to position themselves at a point in the range. So they'd start with the pitch and wedge. So they would hit the pitch and wedge, and they would see, okay, it's apex, and this tree was his benchmark for where he wanted his ball to apex. So the caddy would check the height of it. As soon as they got it good, perfect, move back 10 yards, 9 iron. Same thing, as long as it was apexing at the top of this tree, the loft and lie was correct, or the loft was correct. So even then, pre-launch monitor, pre-TrackMan, pre-GC Quad, this stuff was important to the best players in the world, and it's important to you guys as well. If you want to optimize your ball flight and play your best golf, you have to be conscious of things like, peak height, angle of descent, how is a ball going to be received by the green, is it coming in steep enough to be able to get the control on the way in, all those sorts of things. So that's part of set composition, and that's why this was such an important video for us to do. We want you guys thinking about how is the bag comprised. I like to think of it one way, like how does it balance?
Yeah.
I think that's a nice way to look at it. Like you want a blend of everything. You may not want all the clubs to do the same thing. You may want one that you can hit a little bit lower and one that you hit a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean, especially you go back to wedges, we get guys that be like, okay, bend my 58 to 59 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, they have that in their mind that's going to help them achieve a certain number and stuff like that. So obviously that's where we go back to a gap analysis and see, this is going to give us, open the customer's eyes to where he's got, some gapping, and then we can go from there.
One thing growing up in Scotland that was a bit of a challenge when you're fitting people for wedges, especially, obviously we've got the Open coming up next week at Carnoustie. It's been a really warm summer back in Scotland, so the fairways are just going to be baked, and the approaches to the greens. The challenge for wedges is the turf is so tight, but the sand is so soft.
Yeah.
So, you might find a scenario where you go with a 56 degree wedge that has a lot of bounce, 14 degrees of bounce, so you get that, really good you know, sole interaction through the sand. But round the greens, you might need your 60 to have 4 degrees of bounce, so that it sits super tight, so you can nip it and really get the good interaction. And that's again, you know, customizing it to the needs of the course and the type of shots that.
And like you said, we ask every customer, where do you play? And if they've played within the GTA, someone on staff has probably played the golf course, so we can understand turf conditions and what kind of rough they have and sand and, you know, bunkers and stuff like that. So we can really start to, you know, piece a set together for them that's going to benefit them.
Exactly. Guys, I hope this has been helpful. I mean, this is a pretty deep dig into set composition. Please leave some comments for us if you would like us to sort of go into this in sort of more detail if we possibly can, or specifically focus on a part of the game that we haven't touched on and elaborated as much as you would like. We can certainly do that as well. I hope this has been helpful. Think of your own bag in terms of, you know, is it optimized, is it balanced, and I think that will help you lower your scores.
100%.
Excellent. Guys, thanks so much for this, and we'll see you again soon.